For me, I think one of the things that's really important to restore or maintain, if it's been happening, is relational connection for our children and our families. So I think there's a perception in all of these times that those who are in families don't feel isolated because they've got each other. But actually, I think, speaking from someone who's in a very busy household, actually, it can be a very isolating experience because we're in the midst of this chaotic, frantic at times household, but yet very isolated from any kind of support or any sounding board or anybody who can give me and help me to find sanity in the midst of all of these times. And so I think anything that we can do to support parents and families as a whole, and also children, in terms of having relational contact with others in our faith community, is so key and so important. And alongside that, I think whatever we can do to encourage intergenerational relations within our church communities is so key. So in our church, we have separate children's church, if you like, online, and then an adult church. Now, of course, children are welcome to watch the adult church, but not many do, and it's not particularly accessible, really. And so my children haven't really seen adults worshipping or praying or talking about God in this whole time. Hopefully they've seen that through me and in my faith lived out, but not all children will have had parents who've been able to exhibit their faith in that way. And actually, for my kids, they need to see other adults' faith, not just mine, in order to give them a rounded, wholesome experience of faith. And so I think whatever we can do as churches now in terms of providing opportunities for children to see adults worshipping, to see adults praying, to be part of praying with adults, and even those who are just a little bit older, perhaps teenagers too, to have that whole spectrum of children seeing faith lived out, of seeing struggles of faith in some people's lives, of seeing people having difficulties and praying through them and seeing what God can do in those situations. That is so powerful for children to see. But also in terms of how we can support children and families and parents is so key. And I think the key to that is listening. And we can do that even in these difficult times. I've heard so many stories recently of people, families particularly, who have struggled, often families with children with special educational needs, medical issues, perhaps children who have anxiety issues. Also, there's many other families who, single parent families, lots of different things which make life really difficult. And it's so important as churches that we are listening to these families to see how we can help them, how we can support them. And even if all that is having a chat or sending a text every now and then, dropping around a little card, dropping off some flowers, something like that, these little acts of kindness really make a huge difference. So I think listening to our families in these times and through those genuine relationships that we have is so key.
What I'm looking forward to about getting back face to face is being able to be together with people again in messy church. That togetherness is the most important thing, really, and being close to people, hanging out with different ages again, being able to eat together will be fabulous, and sharing things, all the very physical things that come along with messy church. So restoring all those is going to be a breath of fresh air. And is there anything that we've learnt can be dropped? I did wonder whether the messy church at home sessions that we've been putting out might come to an end when we're back face to face, but I'm not so sure. I think one thing that lockdown has taught us is that actually we got the facilities to communicate the gospel in all sorts of ways. So I think maybe we'll stick with that, and we'll certainly try and keep up the connectedness, the togetherness that we've got on things like the teams and leaders Facebook lives every week. They've been fantastic. But I think what we might drop is, ironically, messing about. I think this time has actually taught me that messy church really is important. It really is lasting. It's gone deeper into people's lives than we'd thought it might. And it's really important for sharing the gospel across the ages and being church together. So I think we're going to stop messing about and worrying about whether we are important or not, and we're going to start doing it with intention.
Something which I think we have perhaps lost a bit during the pandemic is the voice of the child and the role that children have in our churches. Now, I think perhaps before the pandemic, this was a little bit on shaky ground already. But I think because of all of the restrictions and all of the difficulties and challenges that we've had, a lot of what I've seen is that children's voice hasn't been maintained. So I think that's something we really need to get back to as soon as we can, in terms of how can we ensure that children feel they genuinely have a role to play in our churches, they genuinely have a voice in the decisions, in the things that are happening. And it's not just kind of making a pretense at giving them a role, but it's a genuine thing. So I think that's something that we really need to get back to as soon as we can. One thing which I'd kind of not be in a hurry to go back to is this kind of habitual, demanding, burdensome need that we have to have attendance every single Sunday morning from families. And actually, speaking as a family who have always done that and have always found that to be really important as part of our family life, actually now that we can access church online, perhaps quite early in the morning at 9 o'clock, and then we can go out for the morning and have some really special family time. And then for us as parents to access our part of online church in the evening, actually that's given us some really good quality time. And so I'm kind of sitting here as someone who's always been heavily involved in children's church on a Sunday morning, thinking, wouldn't it be great to not be burdened by all of these lists and demands and having to churn out endless things every single Sunday morning? Are there different ways that we can do that, that we can support our children's faith actually in a much more enjoyable way, which is less demanding, in a way that's much more genuine and lived out? And I'm still pondering how that would look, but I think that's something that I'm kind of feeling at the moment in myself.
Well, I want to see all meetings that serve cake restored as soon as possible. And those that don't serve cake, well, cake must be served. Or bye-bye.
One of the things as I reflect back over my time in children's ministry on is how much time I've spent trying to entertain children and give them fun experiences, or perhaps fill time while the adult service finishes, or to put events on to fill the holidays just because the church want us to be putting these events on, or parents like them to entertain the children in the holidays. And I think that's something we need to really get over, because you know what? The internet is filled with all sorts of things that entertain our children and provide really fun experiences, actually probably a lot better than we can in our local churches. And so I think that's something we need to get away from. But actually what we can do that others perhaps can't, that children can't just click on Netflix, they can't access spiritual encounters and meaningful experiences. And so I think that's something we need to have a shift in our churches going forward, in terms of not thinking we have to entertain children for 3 hours now because somebody expects us to, but thinking, right, let's scrap all of that and think, what do children need? What will actually help children from a spiritual approach? What will help children to discover more of God, to have an openness and an awe of the spiritual realm, so that they can explore who God is, so that they can find out for themselves what faith is for them, and to encounter God for their own personal way. And also, but to think about how they can have a role in serving others and have an outward expression of their faith. And all of those things are a bit more tricky to kind of shoehorn into a pre-packaged program which just looks super duper on a flyer or on a church website, but actually perhaps has got negligible support for a child's faith journey. And so I think we need to really be thinking about how we can start from the basis of wanting to help the child's faith. And what do we need for that? Perhaps instead of that, we need to just not meet every single week for an hour, but perhaps we need to have a whole day out, just all of us going on a walk and stopping along the journey and having like little pilgrimage type ideas, lots of different events that we can encounter together as families, or different things like that. So that I think we need to really be challenged to think about starting from the needs of the child spiritually and going from there. Something which I think we've really seen value in is partnering with parents as churches. And so I think parents are more aware than ever of what goes on in our churches with children on a Sunday morning. So I've often thought that many parents just have no idea when their children leave their side and go through the door through to children's church on a Sunday morning. They don't know what happens. And then the child comes out and they go home and possibly never even speak about it. And yet now we have the situation where parents, even if they're not on the screen, they are seeing their child interacting with our different children's activities on the screen. And so parents are a lot more aware of the kind of things that are being talked about, how they're being talked about, the different activities they're doing, and so on. And that's given us unique opportunities to involve parents more and to partnership with parents in terms of supporting children's faith nurture in the home and so on. And so I think that's something we need to really capture and keep hold of once we return to churches, in terms of working with parents in a partnership and not just taking responsibility back by the church to support the child's faith, but actually working together. And so how can we on a week by week basis communicate with parents? Well, we talked about this today, and it'd be great if you could develop it in this way sometime during the week. And in so doing, really genuinely show parents that this is a partnership of working together and alongside them in terms of supporting their child's faith.
Regarding reconnecting with families, I think people will be so hungry to meet together in these huggable situations. They'll be rushing through our doors and we need to make sure we're ready. There are elements of what we did that are so vital, and I think the lack of this has really made families sit up and recognise the value that we brought to them as a family, but also to the communities. Of course, we miss the teacups that need washing, the floor that needs sweeping, and the toys that need putting out and putting away. But of course, we miss the hugs. We miss the smiles. We miss the new family coming through the door and who are so thrilled to meet with new friends.
Something which I think we need to be really aware of is how we inspire people to be involved in children's ministry, how we envision them, rather than making people feel guilted into being involved in our children's ministry. And it does concern me that numbers of people involved in children's ministry has dramatically reduced over this time. And it does worry me going forward how that will look. And so I think we need to very quickly get back to this thing of helping people to see the value in children's ministry, that whole thing of Jesus placing a child in the midst and talking about how precious and how valued and how important that child is in the kingdom of God, and therefore how we need to be supporting that child in their faith and treating them in the way that Jesus would. So I think getting back to re-envisioning and inspiring those in our congregation to see the worth and value in children is a really important thing. And that can't just happen in our children's churches. It needs to happen right at the top in our churches, right from the front, from the leaders, every single Sunday, every single session, whenever that might be, projecting the message very deliberately, the place and value that children have in our churches, so that adults can see the value and want to be involved, want to be part of that, want to be passionate and involved and inspired for helping our children's faith.
Hello, I'm Nick from powerpackministries.co.uk, and I just wanted to think a little bit about which pre-COVID activities I'm desperate to bring back in, and which I think I need to reflect on and maybe put down. So I'm desperate to meet face to face again in toddler groups, in community groups, in church family, on Sunday mornings. I want to worship with other people and sing with other people. And I think from the feedback I've had from the children and families connected to my church, that's what they'd like to do too. They want to participate and join in. They want to come and belong again and see each other again and be in the same space and use all their senses together again. And I think we've been missing in our church particularly, we've been presented with things, but rather than being just presented with things, we want to participate, we want to engage, we want to use our gifts, we want to be part of the teamwork, we want to pray with each other and minister with each other. And those hands-on, face-to-face activities that we did all the time, we really miss. And so I am really keen to restore those things. God's created us in his likeness, and all of our senses and all of those things about us, I think, express our worship and praise and adoration to him. And when we do that together, it's powerful. But I've also taken this time to just write down all the different activities that I'm involved with, or our church is involved with. And I've been challenged, and this is my own personal challenge, rather than necessarily something that you might have the same thing. So I've ticked the things where I'm able to share the gospel, where I can share the good news, where I can talk about miracles I've seen with Jesus, where I can talk about the Holy Spirit. And I've circled the ones where it's difficult, or there's been little effect, or where I'm presenting but no one's really responding. And I've decided that God's asking me to do the activities where I put Jesus right in the centre and let other people do some of those really good things that I was doing before. But he's challenged me to just do activities that share about Jesus and who Jesus is, really with my word and deeds. Whereas lots of those activities I was doing were just with my deeds, what I did, and I've not seen the fruit of that for quite a long time. I've been really challenged by CAP, the Christian Debt Organisation, because they put the gospel right in the centre. Yes, they bring freedom, and yes, they bring release from financial difficulties, but actually the centre of everything they do is the gospel. And I'd like that too, and that's what Jesus did. I want to express the gospel through word and deed. So me going forward is going to write the list and choose God-centred, Jesus-centred things. I wonder what yours is. If you wrote your activities down, what would God be saying to you? Just invite the Holy Spirit to come and speak to you. So as you go forward, what's he saying to you and your groups and your church family and your ministries? I just want to encourage you to allow some space just to dwell on where God might be leading you next.